My name is Anne Marie Molinari Sanders, and I'm going to be your host today for this Tech and Tell. We are welcoming back Ashley Winkle from Train PD at TCall. So she is going to be our presenter today. And our topic is HyperDocs, taking it to the next level. And now I'd like to officially introduce our presenter today. Ms. Ashley Winkle is a technology and distance learning specialist for the Texas Center for the Advancement of Literacy and Learning at Texas A&M University. She is also the integrating technology moderator for LINKS, which is our national professional development organization that I'm sure many of you are familiar with. She is a Journeyman 2 technology coach who started in adult education as a volunteer for the Literacy Council of Tyler in Tyler, Texas in 2013. And she immediately fell in love with adult education and became a high school equivalency teacher within a matter of months. There she taught HSC and ABE classes while also taking on roles of Director of Distance Learning, PD Coordinator, and Trainer. In August of 2020, Ashley started her position with TCall, which is an acronym for the Texas Center for the Advancement of Literacy and Learning, where she heavily is involved with the Texas AEL Distance Learning, content development, project management, and the Technology Integration Coach Program. I would also like to say that she has been presenting Tech and Tell webinars for over 3 years. So she has been a pioneer with the Tech and Tell series. She is extremely passionate about teaching, training, and integrating technology in the adult education classroom. And she also has 2 master's degrees, one in teaching and learning with a specialization in teaching leadership and a Master of Science degree in business management. At this time, please, I'd like you to welcome Ashley in the chat pod if you would, and I'm going to transfer over the controls to Ashley. Here we go. Welcome, Ashley.
All right, thank you. I always never know how to start after that big introduction. Thank you, Anne-Marie. Welcome, everybody. I'm happy that everybody's here. I'm excited to do this presentation today. We've done lots of presentations on HyperDocs in the past, but it's been a while, and we did one last week on HyperDocs for beginners. This one is taking it to the next level. So this isn't so much of the basics how-to. So if you are here for that, it's fine for you to stay, but just keep in mind that you'd want to go watch that video once it's on PD Portal as well, because I don't want to try to overwhelm anybody by any means. But basically, right now, for the purpose of this, we're taking it to the next level, and I really had to think what that means, particularly where we're at right now with the world we're in is so drastically different. I know in 2017 is when I started using HyperDocs, and the world was completely different. I'm sure everybody agrees with me on that, but especially now that we're in remote world as well as face-to-face. And the other thing is we have a whole bunch new technology that we can use. So we're gonna go through some of our ideas and also have an opportunity to basically ask questions. And please, 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 I encourage you to share. I know I recognize some names that I know that you have some knowledge on technology. So please share, engage as much as you want to, ask questions. Anne-Marie, feel free to interrupt me if you think that's what we need to do. I do have question slides, but I'm happy to have discussions and answer questions. So just to kind of get us started, I would like to know who is here today. I know we are a small group, but we have a couple of poll questions we're going to go through real quickly just to get an idea. And I think that Anne-Marie is going to pull up the poll in just a moment. But the first question is, what is your role in adult education?
And Ashley, I'm going to launch the poll, and I actually have the 3 questions all together for you, okay?
Okay. Oh,
okay.
Awesome.
Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
All right, everyone, I'm going to launch the poll right now.
We have teachers, support staff, administrator, distance learning, multiple roles, which is probably quite a few people. Or if you're something else, go ahead and type it in the chat for us. And I do see that Carlotta says she's an instructor and tester. Okay, so it looks like mostly teachers, administrator, distance learning. Okay.
I love that, Tiffany.
Yes, Tiffany is a plethora of jelly beans.
Oh my goodness.
I
What
understand.
that is just wonderful. Okay.
Let's see, comfort level with HyperDocs. Don't see anybody yet who said extremely comfortable. That's fine. Pretty comfortable. I've used them at least 3 times. Or somewhat comfortable. I've used them, but still learning. Okay, so that's the majority, and that's fine. That's great. Mostly, I'm hoping that you at least have a little bit of background on what they are. And if you don't, that's okay too. I just don't want to overwhelm anybody today is my biggest thing. Last question was, what kind of a teacher are you? If you're a teacher, we've got, looks like a mixture again. We've got ABE, ESL, ASE, instructional coach. Awesome. Or I'm not a teacher. Okay, I think we can go ahead and get started then.
Okay, and some people did respond in the chat bot. Okay.
All right, well, we're gonna go ahead and get started then. So our objectives today for this session is to identify and apply best practices for creating, using, and sharing HyperDocs in both remote and face-to-face environments. So we're going to go ahead and talk about taking HyperDocs to the next level. So before we even get started, I do want to have a little bit of a chat about maybe if you have questions right now that you've had about creating, using, or sharing HyperDocs that you would like to have answered by the end of this session. And you can just drop your ideas in the chat, or if you don't have any, that's okay too, if you're just here to learn more. And if you don't have any, I would also like, or if you do, that's fine too, but I'd also like to know, how about this? What challenges have you faced when implementing digital lessons or tools into your instruction? And when I talk about challenges, I am talking about it can be face-to-face or remote. It doesn't matter what it is. We're still going to have those challenges. If you have something specific to HyperDocs, great. If you don't, that's okay too. When I implemented our PD HyperDoc, I had a couple of teachers with low digital literacy skills. Waterfall? Is that what that says? Waterfall, okay.
When they all come in at once.
Yes. They all come in at once.
Oh yeah, I got you there. Yeah, so low digital literacy skills. So Tiffany, question then, are we talking about was this a face-to-face PD session or was this an online PD session?
It would be face-to-face because our intake with teachers when they are new, they are face-to-face. So
Okay.
I have to do the HyperDoc, our PD HyperDoc that was taken or copied from yours when you were at Tyler.
Long time ago,
And
yes.
we went from step to step, but some of the teachers that we had low digital skills where their wives would do it for them. So you know
Your
what I mean?
wives would?
They would do everything for them, like anything that has to deal with computers or fax or anything like that. So yeah.
And I did too. So I had with PD in particular, I've had that challenge too with my teachers. Sometimes I found some of my teachers were more challenging than my students. So it is a training challenge. If anybody else has anything to add as far as challenges with digital lessons, you can go ahead and drop it in the chat, but we're going to go ahead and keep going. So we are going to kind of go through the definition because I think this is pretty important to this session. And HyperDocs, this was basically taken from, and there's a lot of definitions of how people, but I took this from the HyperDocs website because this was a quote that is a recent quote on there that really does make sense to me. But they're basically the ultimate change agent in the blended learning classroom. With strong educational philosophies built into each one, HyperDocs have the potential to shift the way you instruct with technology. And they're created by teachers and given to students with the purpose in mind to engage, to educate, and to inspire learning. So it's not about teaching technology, it's about using technology to teach. But in the interim of that, what's going to happen is you're also going to be really developing digital literacy skills, which guess what? Not just for your students, but sometimes it even helps us. I can't tell you how much I learned about technology until I started using HyperDocs. So it's kind of, it goes both ways. So you have a real opportunity in a face-to-face in particular environment, you really have an opportunity to get those students on a computer and building those digital skills. However, we don't always have computers. So I am aware of that as well. Tiffany says for training, had in mind, it's a challenge to implement new tech thing when they are comfortable with what they're doing. Yes, that's a really good point. They're so comfortable with one thing that, yeah, I'm sorry, I was reading the chat. So it's very challenging when they become so comfortable, they don't want to move on, right? So especially teachers do that a lot. Like they're like, okay, I'm using this, I don't want to do anything else. But sometimes there's a need for something different. Okay. So their official definition is a digital lesson with links to a variety of media on a given topic for students to consume information and include one or more opportunities for students to connect beyond the classroom, collaborate, create or show what they know, share, reflect, and or incorporate in extension activities. But I like a little bit of a simpler definition, which is they're basically interactive digital lessons that replace the worksheet and lecture method of delivering instruction. And if you don't know, these are the HyperDocs girls who kind of started it all. Fun bunch of girls. They're a ton of fun to watch if you ever get to see them present. They have a lot of free ones out there. It's like going to a party when you go. It's so much fun. But they basically discovered HyperDocs out of a need to create a way for teachers to instruct effectively with technology while simultaneously accomplishing all that they are required to do. And then, of course, in 2016, they wrote this little book, this little handbook. This changed my life after I read it. My instruction was completely altered for the best.
Ashley, we did have a quick question. This is a good one. It came in right when you moved over. Carmen, are we able to get the handbook from them or?
Yes, the handbook can be found on Amazon. That's where I got it anyhow. You can get it. I think it cost me like $10. And that was in 2017. It could have changed since then. That was a long time ago. But yeah, it's like $10. I got it on my Kindle and I read it basically on a trip down to, well, my husband drove. I wasn't driving, but trip down to San Antonio. I read it there and it was really helpful to me. Yeah, Tiffany said the same thing. I got it digitally, but you can also get the actual book if you want it as well. For me, that really helped me because my brain was like so excited when I first just kind of saw a glimpse, but I wasn't grasping it. So that really kind of helped me to develop and understand it. And it's worth investing in. Okay, so we're gonna get into creating HyperDocs a little bit. I know a couple of you were here for last week's beginner session, so some of this is gonna look familiar. I just felt that some parts of it were worth repeating. Planning a HyperDoc is something that people have come to me and said, well, we want to understand your process of what you go through. So I'm not saying like this is the only way to plan a HyperDoc. I'm saying this is how I do it. And everybody's different. So you may have something that works better for you, but these are just suggestions at this point. The big thing is obviously to identify your target audience. Sometimes my audience is a PD session, so it might be teachers. But other times, maybe it's an ESL group, maybe it's HSE, and sometimes I'm creating a HyperDoc with the intent of doing it for two different groups because I taught HSE and ABE classes. So sometime I would create one, but I kind of alter it, a version of it to make it maybe a little bit easier for a lower level class. Choose your subject matter and content. Specify the skills and content standards you want to target. So we're still, what I kind of mentioned this the last time is what I was so blown away with was when the content standards really became a thing, the 2.0 at that time. I think now going to be 3.0, that they just went very, very nicely with the standards. So I'm still paying attention to my standards, but I always found that with making HyperDocs, it's a nice layout for a virtual digital lesson plan. So it went So even if I saw something on a HyperDoc that wasn't there that I needed for my lesson, I could always add it. So that's kind of what I love about it, the flexibility. Determine the big ideas that you would like your students to explore. That's the big thing with HyperDocs, is exploration. And of course, research or select material that might be useful for your HyperDoc. Create a rough draft of a lesson plan or just notes, however you might do it. And select the HyperDoc platform. This is what I kind of changed from last week. Last week, I was keeping everything very, very basic for beginners. This time, I'm stepping it up a bit. So when I say platform, traditionally, what that means is Google, because that's what it all started, was with a Google document or Google slide. But we're in a whole new world now. We have all sorts of options, which is awesome for different reasons. And that's really kind of what we're looking at now. What platform we want to use to basically, put it all together. And then of course, begin your HyperDoc. So a little bit more on HyperDoc platforms. So as I said, traditionally, we would use a Google document, a Google slide. I mean, I think I started with a Google document. There's templates already made. I followed the directions. And we went from there. When I felt a little bit more creative, I know Tiffany Lee likes Google Slides because she's so creative. I do too, just depends on what I'm doing, of course. And then I've seen the more ambitious teacher, meaning K through 12 usually, they've even gone as far as use a Google site. It's too much for me. So I usually stuck with Google Documents and Google Slides, but Google Sites is an option. Eventually, what I started seeing more of was Microsoft Word, PowerPoint, and OneNote. And what happened was they became cloud-based, right? So now we have different options for the Microsoft. So, and and a lot of times I'm adapting to Microsoft world very slowly. I'm trying to be good at both, but I'm comfortable with Google because I worked with Google with my students. So I always automatically, my comfort zone is Google. But you might work in somewhere that doesn't have Google G Suite, in the school. So you might have Microsoft. So now there are options with Microsoft, and Microsoft has a very, very nice product. I mean, I can't say they don't. They're a lot fancier, but that's eventually what ended up happening. But before we keep talking about platform, let's kind of go back to our definition and really look at those key words. So digital lesson with links, variety of media, connect beyond the classroom, collaborate, create, share, and reflect. So those are like the really key points to a HyperDoc lesson. So what I'm wondering is, are you using, or do you know of any technology tools that you use now that allow you to do the same thing? So the question is, have you tried or considered creating a HyperDoc with a tool beyond Google? Or if you haven't, can you think of any tools that maybe you could use that that you love right now that maybe kind of apply to this definition? Tiffany says Wakelet. Yes, Wakelet would probably be my first go-to as well, Tiffany. Padlet, it could possibly. I have not tried it, but I knew somebody was going to say Padlet, so I'm going to say I've never done it, but it doesn't mean it can't be done. Tiffany, I did change the PD HyperDoc to a place on a Google site. Okay. Yeah, like I said, Padlet, I wish I had kind of played around with it before this training, but I didn't have time. But I was thinking, I'm like, I wonder if you could do that. If you can do these types of things, I think it could be done. The creativity that's there is kind of amazing. Does anybody have any other tools or technology they like to use that they find that's pretty engaging, connects beyond the classroom, allows you to collaborate, create, share? All right. It's okay if you don't. I'm kind of surprised Tiffany doesn't, though. Hold on. Some ideas that I had. Amaro says Kahoot quizzes. Absolutely love those. I don't know if those would work. Possibly quizzes. Maybe Kahoot, the pro version, though, because they're making more of those, that they're becoming more like slides and presentations. So I attended a Kahoot session that blew my mind one day, that like I was just engaged the entire time. So it could possibly work. I just don't know if there's enough independent practice, but with enough creativity, again, I think it could. So I just kind of came up with some things that came to my mind right away. Of course, I'm trying to look beyond Google. Okay. And there's reasons, and then we're going to get into reasons later. But for right now, let's just kind of think about the platform. Where can I put these HyperDocs digital lessons into one place? Go Formative, another one that we have a Tech Intel on. I saw Anne-Marie mentioned the Tech Intels earlier. Most of the things I use, we have a Tech Intel on. Go Formative is one that we're going to actually look at today. Nearpod is the one I was expecting Tiffany Lee to say, because she is a Nearpod expert, and I just recently started using it and absolutely love it. Yeah, I'm surprised you forgot that one. I can see turning a Nearpod into a HyperDoc. I have not done it yet. I have played around with Nearpod, but I haven't gotten that far yet. So yeah, Tiffany, your time will come. Okay. Wakelet, which we mentioned also. I'm not that familiar with Deck Toys, but I've been looking at it for many years. I don't know if anybody else has tried it out. And there's so many others. There's a lot of things that we can do with HyperDocs now, which is excellent. It used to be that I would use a Go Formative. I'd create a Go Formative, which we will be looking at shortly, and I would put it on my HyperDoc until one day I was like, well, why am I doing that when I can actually create my HyperDoc using a Go Formative? Nearpod, to answer that. So Nearpod is an interactive digital tool that allows you to interact with and engage with your students throughout. So it basically takes all of those elements, when you think about it, that we just talked about, and it lets you put it all into one platform. And they already have so many of them that are already made that you can just adapt. And so what happens is your student is excellent for remote world, but your student can actually type in a code and they can answer questions as you go through each slide. That's an overview of it. I would love to see, a Tech Intel in the future, just throwing that out there. Tiffany Lee's an expert at it at this point, but it's a great lesson. I haven't actually made a HyperDoc using it, but I can see doing it for sure. So it's one to check out. But I decided for today's purposes, I was going to stick to what I am more of an expert on. So we're just going to look at some other examples of how we can create HyperDocs beyond Google. So as we're going through the examples, I want you to kind of think about reasons you would want to use different platforms to create your HyperDocs. I know I've always been a big Google fan. Because it worked for my students. I know a lot of people aren't, but it was about the students. So I was so into Google 100%, especially when HyperDocs started. But to be honest with you, when I started going beyond was when we went emergency remote last year, and that changed my thinking completely. And I'll get a little bit more into that in just a bit. So we're going to look at here is I've got 3 examples of what a traditional Google HyperDoc would look like and what it could look like in another platform. Now, this first set here, I did not make these. I took these from the HyperDoc community, and I've just been fascinated. I did attend a session at ISTE last year on OneNote. I always call it the wrong word, OneNote. And it was really good. It was really interesting. So I wanted to show a demonstration of that. All right, so this is our traditional, like I said, this is not something I made. This is something that I believe one of the HyperDocs girls made, and she made it for a K-12 class. So this isn't for adults, but it could probably be tweaked. And you see we've got 50 states digital road trip, and we've got our traditional Google document. So she's made tables, and she's added some pictures and tells them to go explore ThingLink, and they're doing different things. Very, very highly interactive. And Anne-Marie, I knew you'd appreciate Adobe Sparks at the end. She has them make an Adobe Spark, and then they turn in their videos. But that's basically our traditional HyperDoc. It takes place on a Google. But we went from that, and they made another one using, I'm saying that right, OneNote, yes. I get confused between OneNote and OneDrive. It's OneNote. OneDrive is the drive. Okay. And so now we have OneNote, and I don't know if anybody's played with this. I had never used it until actually I started with T-Call because everything was so Microsoft based. So I started playing with it. I like using it just for organizing my presentations and things like that. But they took it and they made a HyperDoc out of it. And you can see that we've got our video. Some of these are outdated, I noticed though, but they've got video embedded. Everything is right here. And the nice thing, if you use something like OneNote or really any Microsoft product, is the accessibility issues, because they have the option for immersive reader and things like that. But we're doing the same thing. It's just that it looks a little bit different. And there's different reasons people choose it over Google, which I'm going to get into a little bit more, but you can kind of see, you know, everything is right there. I've got my videos right there. I'm going to type on the right side. Again, there's always pluses and minuses to every tool. And I can already tell you right off the bat what my issue is, but I'm going to not go there right now. But I could tell you that right off the bat, the reason I always chose Google is always for the simplicity of it. This is going to be a higher step than that, and this is going to be more training your students on Microsoft products. But there could be some major advantages of that, especially if you are a program that has the whole suite. If you have that, this, and you use Teams and things like that, this is definitely probably an option that you would want to consider. Okay, the next one we're going to look at is, okay, so on this one, I use like an example of a similar topic because you're going to look at one that I made using a different tool completely. But this was one that I found, I was surprised there weren't more coronavirus HyperDocs made that I could find anyway, but there aren't. So I found one on the pandemic. This is obviously probably not made for adults because this is driving me crazy. I don't know if it's driving anybody else crazy. The movement, not a good thing for us to have on our HyperDoc, but you know, it's about the pandemic. This is another format that could be a template that could be used. It is again a Google document. Like I said, probably created for K through 12. They're doing the same types of things. You know, we're going out, we're exploring. This one is a little bit different because she does not, or he, whoever made it, does not actually have the student coming back and typing on the HyperDoc. So it is done a little bit differently, which is fine. But that's the Google version. Well, when we went into remote emergency, I went into complete panic like everybody else. And as I started, before we even got to the remote world, I should say, we weren't even there. Like, we just knew we had to do something and we just didn't know what to do. I'm just speaking for my own program because I had never done remote learning. I had done webinars and things like that, but remote learning was just for some reason making my head explode. I was like, oh my God. And I don't know about anybody else, but I did so many like professional development trainings until I got brave and gave it, you know, a little bit of time and then jumped in. But I still didn't know like how to do it with the students. So I actually made this lesson with the original lesson I made for this was I called it a digital lesson to keep my students doing something. But I didn't want to put it on a Google document. I wanted it to be something that I could drop into Remind, the Remind app, or, you know, whatever you use to communicate with your students. I wanted a link. I wanted them to be able to go to it and still be able to access the different tools that we have without being too stressed out about it, because I knew they didn't have computers. So that was the main thing going through my head. So I ended up taking the same lesson and I revised it a bit to become a remote lesson. And I did it differently. With a traditional HyperDoc, I would have the students, if it was me and I was in a classroom and I had computers, we don't, you know, had a lot of things. I would have, everybody would be on a computer. They would be, you know, they'd have a split screen and they'd be going to town, basically. They would be doing independent work, group work, everything. Well, I had to change that format. So what I ended up doing instead is we would do a lot of these together. And so we started out with a little KWL chart about what do you know, what have I learned? And you have two options there. It was too early, so I did not drop the link into the chat because they were not ready for that. So I typed as they talked. But as they got better trained, I should say, they were able to start clicking on links and going outside, because that stresses people out, especially the first time when you're on a Zoom for the first time and you only have one screen, and then you go out and you're like, where'd my Zoom go? The students really stress out about that. So I was trying to avoid that from happening. So we ended up walking through this, and we still were able to do the things that we're used to doing. We could still do an Edpuzzle video, which is another one of our favorite tools, interactive videos. And we could still do these things, but this time we did it different. I see a question, Ashley, and they were doing all this on their phones. Yes, 100% on their phones. There were like maybe 1 or 2 people who had computers, but everybody else was on a cell phone. So the nice thing is, though, I could still use the tools, but I had to really focus on what the best tools I had. When I put my HyperDoc together, I had to make sure my tools were the best for mobile and computer. And that's when I found it getting really time consuming, right? And so I'm like, well, it already takes me a lot of time, to prepare, but now it's taking longer because I needed to see what does it look like on the phone and things like that. So I ended up finding the best tools, and it so happens the best tools were working well with my mobile app. On mobile, they were the ones that I was already using the most, my favorite ones. So it was things like Edpuzzle, but this time, like an Edpuzzle video, typically I could have students watch it independently on their own and engage with it. I could show it in a classroom and, be in front of the class, and they could still engage with it. They could answer questions from their device. But I decided not to do all that. Instead, I would show the Edpuzzle video on Zoom and just have them answer in the chat instead, or just unmute themselves. I just didn't want to stress the student out. Eventually, what I built to is I had them watch the Edpuzzle, and then I gave them a code. They clicked on the link and they got to engage with it and answer questions. That was the most ideal, but I found that I had to walk them through it. And then from there, we go to, this is just a little assessment check. I don't want to get too informative right now because I'm about to talk about that. And it takes them to a PDF. And then I think Meryl mentioned quizzes, which is probably my favorite game-based. I did have them do quizzes on their own. Now, we did have a challenge because we had an ABE and an HSE group mixed. My students were the HSE group, and that group had no problem going to quizzes because they already knew it. The ABE class that wasn't familiar, we had to bring them back to us, and we did the quizzes together, just answered questions in the chat. So we just kind of implemented until they got used to it. Went back to the KWL chart, and then I still found it very challenging to find independent practice part of my lesson. So I took them to Actively Learn because my students knew Actively Learn. It's a reading website, it's interactive, and I could see what they were doing while they were doing it. And if they wanted, they could just stay on Zoom with me while they did it, or they could go off and do it on their own. So it was different. So what I was finding is with the HyperDoc that I would traditionally make, what I was doing is I was being very selective about what I put them out there to go do on their own. I'm sorry, I thought that was a new question. So it is different. And there's a lot of reasons I chose to go with a Wakelet versus a Google document. But I want to talk about that afterwards. But the biggest thing I will say is when you're doing this, and especially when you're thinking about virtual versus face-to-face, you've got to think about how long it takes to prep a remote lesson. Because at least for me, remote lessons were taking a lot longer than any lesson I had ever made before. And so with that in mind, I was finding I didn't want to put quite as much time into the HyperDoc as I had in the past because I didn't have the time to do it. Okay, so that is my second example. Still good on time. Okay. The third example I wanted to show was taking a Google Documents HyperDoc. Now, this is one that both of these I did actually do. This one was on the Great Depression. This is one of my first ones, actually, and I actually kind of borrowed this idea from K through 12. But, it's a Google document on the Great Depression. They go to links, they go outside, they're exploring, and they're reading, and then they're coming back to their document, answering questions, You can tell that this was new because I was still putting the whole link in there. I wasn't making it fancy, or maybe I was doing a little bit of both. I'm not really sure what I was doing, but anyway, they watched videos. We went through slides. This was a pretty extensive lesson. Then they looked at photography. So they did all this different stuff. And this took probably several weeks realistically to get through, but it was a great lesson. That's the Google version. And so what I did is I kind of simplified it a bit and took it to a Go Formative. No, I think Go Formative is still on our Tech Intels, but I'm not sure. That might have been a few years ago. Not sure about that one. Anne-Marie, do you know?
I believe that one is not. No,
Okay. Yeah, I was gonna say that's kind of outdated now.
it is not. Actively Learn is, but not.
Okay, yeah, because that wasn't quite as long ago. But Go Formative it's an assessment tool that you can make very interactive. Meryl, did the students make a copy of the HyperDoc for themselves to work on, or do they work collaboratively? That is a really good question. So Meryl, traditionally, if I'm using Google, I force a copy for them using Google Classroom. So if they're using a Google product, they have to make a copy of it to answer that question. Somehow that has to be done. That's why I use Google Classroom for that. For a Wakelet, like I just showed, no, they don't have to have a copy, because the way I made the Wakelet, there was nothing that they actually had to type on the Wakelet itself. So even like I have a Google form or something. So when I had something that I wanted them to actually type an answer, I would use like a Google form or something like that, so that I didn't have to deal with the stress of making a copy on a cell phone. And I know it can be done. My students weren't trained to do it. Okay, awesome. So this is a Go Formative, and this is coming from what I'm doing right now is demonstrating from a student's perspective. So all I did was click on a link. I share it with the students. They enter their name. And now what we have is an entire lesson. And what you can see is we've got 22 different elements on there. And this was also one of the first ones I ever made as well. But we're doing the same thing. Look at the picture. What do you think? What's happening here? Here we've got a reading. I can have them zoom in so they can read it. And then on the right side, what they're doing is answering the questions that follow. Now, I was not very good at this back then, and I would probably put the actual questions right here now, but that was a long time ago. But still, and then you answer questions. The nice thing about the Go Formative is as they're answering the questions, I can see what they're doing while they're doing it, and I can make comments as they go. And they can make comments back to me. So it's very much in real time. And they have a lot of different types of things and elements you can add. Like in this case, it's, a little show your work. Where was the dust bowl? So they could circle they would circle the states that the dust bowl was in. So it's very interactive and engaging. This makes me think a lot of, since we were talking about Nearpod earlier, this is similar to Nearpod. It's just a different option. Nearpod is, I'm not going to say one is better than the other because it depends on what you want. This has just always been my go-to for so many years. And it's easy to make, but I'll tell you the real reason I use it. And then at the end, we've got the last one, and we've got a picture, we've got a little writing prompt. And then after they submit it, and it comes straight to me, and then I can look it over. So now the question would be, why would I want to do this versus a Google Doc? But I'm going to stop for a second because I see stuff in the chat. The captures.
Actually, Meryl had an excellent point, and I think this is very important, especially for students, in general. And she said, this captures every type of learner. Exactly. Yes.
And I will say, just kind of a side note, this isn't, obviously this session isn't about one tool versus the other. You have to pick your tools, and you have to take the time to get to know them. Go Formative and Nearpod, you're not just going to jump on and be able to do it right away. Sometimes it takes a little bit, but these things are out there, and they offer so many different options and types of questions, that exactly like what you're saying, so that you can hit every type of learner and make a really engaging lesson. I've actually, with Go Formative, I've got some really cool ones that I've taken, and I've actually been able to embed like a Google slideshow. It's embedded into the formative, and then the students can click on it and go to a different group within the slides to do group work. I mean, there's so many different things because you have this embedding option, which is very nice because then I don't have to worry about them going somewhere where there's a bunch of ads and things like that. Tiffany, I took good notes last session. Nearpod has several activities. Here's the Nearpod activities to help with HyperDocs. And okay, good. Like she said, she uses if we use Nearpod for a HyperDoc, you have an opportunity to engage with videos and questions. So they have that same thing right there in Nearpod where you can put a video in and embed questions into the video. Apply, fill in blanks, game, draw. Yeah, they have a lot of things that you can do on Nearpod as well. But again, one of my favorite features though about formative, why I would choose to use it and used it probably for, I would say almost all of my remote lessons for at least independent practice is because of this. It looks really good on the phone because that's how they set it up. The other nice thing about formative is you can also print it if you need to print it. That happens. But so that's, it just, if it works well on the phone, that all of a sudden became my target, and I'm sure everybody can relate to that quite a bit. It just changed my process of what a HyperDoc in my mind looked like, but that's what we had to do, right? We basically had to change our process with everything. Okay, so with that, and I've kind of hinted at it here and there, I just kind of wanted to see if anybody had thoughts just based on those three. There's a lot of other things that can be done, obviously. If you had thoughts on why maybe we might want to use a tool that wasn't a Google document, especially if you're making your own. Oh, somebody said, I'm using my phone and the doc looks great. Awesome. Yes, I like it when things look good on phones. And I can't lie, I was never, ever a fan of having students on phones. So when this happened, I was like crying. Does anybody have any thoughts? Meryl, diverse technology tool knowledge. Okay, you went a totally smart way there. That's a really good point. It is important to have diverse technology tool knowledge. I hadn't even thought of that as an option. Yes, that is another option. I think it brings up a good point too. We can use the same technology with our students in our classes, but you don't want to do it forever. I think it's important to have something that's consistent. My consistency for the students used to be Google Classroom. They knew to go to Google Classroom every day. That was our consistency. And then I would add as we go. A lot of people, if they're just getting started with technology, they might just want to use one tool for a while and then, slowly add things. But I think they do need diversity because we're in a diverse world that everything's coming at us very quickly. And, this could be when we're thinking about it. So I really started thinking about this in particular when, like I said, with the remote world, because I'm going to tell you why exactly I chose Wakelet. Wakelet was the first time I did it. And I had thought about it. Jeff Gumas with Crowded Learning was kind of pushing, he and I had talked about Wakelet a lot about doing it. And then all of a sudden when this happened, the thing about Wakelet, if you're not familiar, is it's super easy. Like I don't have to sit there, and I'm not saying that making a HyperDoc is hard, but when I do a Google, I have to go and I have to do all this stuff by myself, and I have to do all this. With Wakelet, I could just drop the link in there. It's done. It's there. All they have to do is click on it. I don't have to add any extra notes really, or not too much or anything. And it was very simple. That was one reason. The other reason is I was trying to get a larger audience. So I was actually on the internet sharing this lesson with whoever wanted to share it because it actually had meaningful, good information on it about how to take, about cleaning with the coronavirus when that first came out. So I wanted something easy. I wanted something that a student could click on it, be there, and actually answer questions without having to have a Google account, without having to have any of those extra things that I would have to have if I'm going to see what the students are doing, like I would have to do with Google. So that was my first real reason. And Wakelet ended up becoming the main one I wanted to use. And I use Wakelet for everything. I'm kind of addicted. Tiffany is too, but Wakelet is just a really nice, easy tool that allows you to basically curate everything into one place. So instead of having them maybe go to all these different places throughout a lesson, you can have them go one place. And then afterwards, maybe the student didn't make it to class that day. Well, you can say, well, hey, you didn't miss anything. Here's this lesson. And they can walk through it by themselves, step by step. But some other idea is differentiation. That's something that we want to think about. Immersive reader options. A lot of these have them. Wakelet has them. I know Microsoft has it. I don't think formative is there yet. Doesn't mean it's not going to happen, but you may want to be considering those things for your students. There are things that I know there's Google extensions that you could add to a Google document, but Google itself, at least as far as I know, at this time does not have that option. You've heard me say it probably 100 times now, mobile friendly. So if you don't know what immersive reader is an opportunity for, and you can correct me at any time if I say something wrong, for the student, the user to change the text. And like I know on Wakelet, what it does is it allows you to change it for dyslexic text and different sizes, different colors. It will even pick out the verbs for you and it'll highlight them. And it will even let you, like if you scroll over or highlight a word, it'll show you a picture, a visual of that word as well. And I think it also allows you different languages, definitions, things like that. A lot of these technology tools are really starting to do this more and more. I know Actively Learn does it as well, but that's basically what an immersive reader does in layman's terms. Do you have anything to add to that, Emery?
Excellent. I'll just add that it is a digital tool that interacts with the text that helps it make it more accessible for the learner with all those different ways, highlighting, dictionary, all those things, but it is wonderful. And also sometimes also text to speech.
Oh, yes. I can't believe I forgot that. Yes, that as well. Another one that I was reading about was slow internet connections. So I kind of thought this was interesting that somebody said they chose to use OneNote because of this. So, and again, I'm not proficient in OneNote. So some tools though are going to work better with a slow internet connection than others. So that's something else you have to consider, especially when we have so many students that, live in the country or don't live near internet, that sort of a thing. So this is one that is the real reason I did it on a formative for the first time, was embed directly into the platform. And by that, traditionally with a HyperDoc, you click on a link, you go outside, and now they're out there in the big scary world, basically, the scary internet world. And that could be really probably more concerning, I think, for K through 12, but it could for us too. So with like a formative, what I liked is I could embed an Edpuzzle video. So they don't have to go anywhere. They just watch the video right on the formative. And when I saw that, I got so excited the first time I saw that. I was like, oh my gosh, I can even embed a Padlet. So instead of having them go outside to a Padlet somewhere else, they're still on the same document. And my understanding is that's kind of what OneNote tries to do. But, like I said, I'm not a OneNote expert. But everything is in one place. So instead of having them explore the entire world, I can keep them right here in this document and I can kind of keep track and see what they're doing and make sure that they're in the right place. That could also be probably beneficial, again, on a cell phone if they're on their own, especially because, think about being on your cell phone, you click on a link, it takes you somewhere, and then you're like, where did my document go? I personally go through that. I'm not as cell phone proficient as I am with a computer. So those are things you have to think about though, right? So that was a lot of teachers I talked to in the last years even told me, I don't use HyperDocs anymore because of remote. And I don't think they should be eliminated because they're still such engaging lessons. So I don't think you eliminate them. I just think you do them different. Sharing options. Again, you heard what I said about the Wakelet. With that, the reason I chose Wakelet, the reason I just chose that formative was because it's one single link and that's it. I don't have to do anything else. Send them a link. They don't have to log into anything. They don't need an account anywhere. Some cases, it's great if they have one. Even Wakelet is starting to do student accounts soon, but they don't have to have one because sometimes I don't want it to be that complicated. Sometimes I want them just to click on a link. I can still see what they're doing. They type in their name and we're good to go. Another one that I've embedded into formative is quizzes. So again, it's right there. So they can just play it right there from their screen. They're good to go. And sometimes it's just a quicker option. And that's really ultimately what I was looking for in the last year, was a quicker option, because Google Slides, I love them because they're so creative. And if I want to make something, more fun, I would use a Google Slide. But for what I was trying to do, I just wanted to get the activities in there, wanted to really make them more where they didn't have to constantly engage with the document. I think we call it front facing is what they call that. I didn't want them to have to keep going back to the Google Doc. I mean, they do, but they can just kind of go step by step. And what I would do with that document then with a Wakelet is, even if I did it in class, I would still share it with them either on Remind or on Google Classroom so that they could go back and go through it themselves again. And some students want to do that. Some students don't want to and don't care. But, for the ones that want to, I want them to still be able to go back and go review lessons and things like that. Meryl says, interesting. I haven't used Wakelet, but I'm so inspired to learn more. We have a couple tech intels on Wakelet. Yes, you want Wakelet, trust me. Wakelet is I use Wakelet for everything. And, this kind of goes along with the quicker option. Sometimes it's just the easier option. Like I said, Google is usually going to be my first go-to, but when it comes to just simplicity and ease of use, I'm probably going to use a Wakelet. If it's something I want to get creative with and want to try something new, I might try a Nearpod. So there's just a lot you can do. It just depends on what your students have, what you have, what your school has. I mean, some schools, I've been told many times, they don't have G Suite. Well, then you can't use Google at all. And so you don't have to have G Suite to use HyperDocs though. So that's kind of what I love the most about them, is the flexibility. So, and some of these, again, I've covered before, but I think that's still extremely important to cover in this session. How to share. So that's kind of what Meryl had asked. Do they have to make a copy? Things like that. And it, again, depends on your tool. So it's definitely important to know your tool. So sharing with students, if I was using Google, I wouldn't use anything but Google Classroom. And that's just based on experience. And there's just, Google plays well with Google. That's the best thing that I can say with that. So, but if I'm not using Google, you can use so many other things. You don't have to use Google. I brought up Microsoft Teams because I keep seeing Microsoft's HyperDocs are out there, and I know programs are out there that use Microsoft Teams. I can't even begin to get my head around that because we use Microsoft Teams at TCall, but I pretty much use it for the chat. So beyond that, I've tried to learn it, but it's a very heavy tool. And just like the student part of it, I know nothing about it. I'd love to learn if anybody knows. So, I mean, that's another option. Any learning management system you have. If you don't have a learning management system, I recommend getting one. And when I say learning management system, just so I'm not assuming everybody knows what I'm talking about. I'm talking about that place that you can share with your students. So, it might be an Edmodo, it might be Blackboard, it might be Canva or Canvas. I can never remember if it's Vis or Va. It could be whatever you use, or maybe what your program uses. Canvas, yes. But I believe that everybody should have a home base, is what I call it. And for me, it ended up being Google Classroom. At one time it was Schoology. At one time it was Edmodo. I tried them all. So it just depends. I use Google Classroom because it was simple and it was an easy tool to use for my teachers. Actually, it was more about my teachers than my students in the end. Or you can just do what I did when the pandemic started, and I shared a link with the student on Remind is what I use. But a lot of people, especially ESL, use WhatsApp, and they do all sorts of amazing things with WhatsApp, which there's all sorts of sessions on PD Portal about that too. My students, I had some that used it. We all ended up sticking with Remind in the end for different reasons, but I could just drop a link, they would have it, and you could go from there. So lots of ways to share. Again, it's about knowing your tool, knowing your platform, everything. It's going to be more complicated when you're using Google, probably, if you're going to share. So if you're going to use Google, the biggest thing I can say is make sure you know Google very well. And then, of course, sharing with educators is this is a huge thing. This is really the purpose and the vision of HyperDocs, is they want you to share with each other, not pay for it. They want you to actually share with each other. They share. If you ever go to the Facebook community, ask them a question, you'll have like an answer in no time at all. It's like amazing. But, and of course, I created a website years ago, HyperDocs for Adult Educators, which I'll share all that at the end. But I was told, I will say last week, that somebody said they got some sort of, I don't know, it said danger or something. So I don't know why. So I'm kind of hesitant to do that now because I don't know why it's doing that. And I haven't had time in a week to fix that. So maybe that's something Tiffany can help me with because she knows Google Sites pretty well. So, but if you just Google literally HyperDocs and put a topic, you're probably going to find something. You will also probably find something that is for K through 12 before adults, because, let's face it, there's more of them than us, and they've been using it longer. But that doesn't mean you can't go borrow their ideas and make a copy if it's a Google document. Wakelets, you can make copies of Wakelets too. So, and change it to make it your own. And of course, I'm always a big fan of getting on professional learning networks, which my biggest ones are the Facebook group and Twitter. Learn all sorts of things and find places to share. I'll share my own sometimes as well. And now HyperDocs has a great website now as well. They've worked on it and they've got free courses on there to help people get started, which is really, really nice. Like they've got probably 7 nice little courses just to help you get started. And of course, they've got some things that you can do if you want to, get more into it and actually pay for it. And then, oh yeah, there's a bunch of Padlets out there that have HyperDocs where everybody is shared. And that's actually where I first saw them. And I was like, my head exploded first time I was on there. But yeah, they've got Padlets full of like math HyperDocs, reading HyperDocs, ELA, like there's a lot of them out there. And then a little bit about, Tiffany said, I use Band app. I was playing with that at one point. She uses Band app for communication with classes I take care of and contacting students. You're the first person I know who said that part. I was playing with that last year and I just never actually used it. So yeah, we have a lot of communication tools now that we have so many options for too, which is interesting to me how fast technology changed, because literally in 2019, I was searching for more options with communication tools with students, and it was hard. There were places charging money. I can't even begin to express how expensive they were. And now we have a lot more free options out there. So Band app is another one in addition to Remind and WhatsApp. So just a little bit, I know I've kind of covered it, but just to kind of go over the basis of using HyperDocs in a virtual classroom. These are just, how I would do it, or options that you have essentially is virtual instruction, assign students independent practice. You can always do that. Assign sections of HyperDocs for class activities. That's kind of what I told you I did. I just kind of took certain sections and said this part they'll do independently. Mostly we did a lot of things together. You can also take sections and break them into breakout rooms. I mean, you can do, I think we're learning that whatever you can do in face-to-face, it is possible to do virtually. It's just a little bit more creative. I think you have to be a little more creative. Use a HyperDoc to guide your lesson during Zoom. That is essentially what I would do. I would have my lesson, everything was right there. So even if I had the section where I wanted them to go to breakout rooms, I'd have that activity, go ahead and have them break out in breakout rooms for the group work section. And then assign and use it to guide your lesson. You can also assign it. If you use a platform like Google Classroom, you can assign it, maybe have them work on some sections, independently on their own. You might have some students also that have, already passed math, or they've already passed all those subjects, but math is what I meant to say. And maybe they need to work on functions. Well, what I've done before is I've thrown a HyperDoc together on functions and resources and activities. And I'd say, here you go, Alicia, you work on functions in a breakout room, independently, because she was very tech savvy. So I trusted her to do that anyway. So there's different things. So there's another opportunity there. When you have that one student has passed everything but the one subject and you want to teach that one subject, well, they can go work independently on their own and have an entire lesson. But again, I will point out, your students have to be trained on how to do that. I can't do that with every student, but the students that understand the process, you can do that eventually. Just some more best practices. Choose activities that can easily be done online. No complications, not for us anyway. Choose technology tools that are mobile friendly. Test out the tools and activities with colleagues before class. We did this a lot. We got, what does it look like on Zoom? What does it look like on the phone? What does it look like on the computer? Is this going to work? Is this too confusing? And again, that's where I say virtual learning is a lot harder and it takes more planning. Test out the tools and activities. I just said that, sorry. Don't overwhelm students with too many independent digital activities. My students, when I was in face-to-face, they would just go. Like, they were so trained, they were almost too trained. Like, they'd walk in the door, they'd go to Google Classroom, we'd be working on a lesson, maybe we'd already started, and they just keep working with wherever they were at, and then we'd do some things together. But in digital, it's just so different. It's just so different. It wasn't as easy as that anymore. So we don't want to overwhelm them with too many independent activities. You're going to find that you're going to have to do more things as groups and as a class. Versus face-to-face, which just sounds like heaven to me right now. I just miss being in front of people, I think, and not in front of a camera, but face-to-face used for anything, like, you know, and same with the other. I mean, you can use HyperDocs for everything. We've used them for professional development. We've used them for HSE, ESL. You can use them for anything. Sometimes they're complicated. Sometimes they're simple. It depends on your group. That's up to you to decide that part. But you can synthesize group work, games, activities, whatever you want into a lesson. If you have an activity that is more kinesthetic and you have them up and moving around, which is like the greatest thing in the world in face-to-face, put that in, make that a part of your HyperDoc. There's no reason not to. It doesn't have to all be technology. It can be whatever the cool thing is you're already doing in class activity. Keep it. Let's keep that in there. Make it, I call them, I think I termed it power lessons is what I'm calling them now, is when you bring the best of both worlds into one place and they're digital and, you know, it's all of it. We have everything together, digital and traditional. Integrate, like I said, integrate lecture if that's what you do, and or modeling of the HyperDoc. Make your modeling section part of your HyperDoc. That's where you're going to show them how to do it, right? Well, have that as part of your HyperDoc. It looks like Anne-Marie asked, did working with HyperDocs help your students with other technology skills? That's a good question. Applications, online, digital, resumes, other, yes, that's a good question. So that was probably one of the first things I discovered when I started using them is all of a sudden they're developing keyboarding skills. Some of my lessons were about creating spreadsheets and things like that. And so to answer your question, building confidence. And yeah, so I feel like that having them on a computer anyway is so important with the HSE test being on a computer. That was the whole reason in the very beginning that I was like, they need to be on here no matter what. Because I've seen before, and I'm sure Anne-Marie's heard me say this before, but I have seen students come to our computer lab where I was at the time, and they wanted to take a practice test, and their teacher just gave them a voucher, and nobody showed them how to do anything on GED.com. So they just kind of were fending for themselves, and they were stressed out, and they were sweating, and you know, you don't do that to your student, and don't send them to a test that way. So with HyperDocs, you have so many opportunities because they're engaging on different things. They're learning internet skills, you know, and safety skills and different things, but they're also learning content at the same time. So that's usually ultimately what I love. And then the best part, of course, I think everybody knows this feeling, is when the students start teaching each other. And then all of a sudden you have a few assistants. And so that works out great for me because then, you know, you watch them, and then sometimes what ends up happening is, well, then they end up teaching me how to do stuff. And I'm like, hey, I didn't even know that. So absolutely, I would say definitely confidence builder and really teaching digital skills without having to just teach digital skills. It's a little bit of everything. And then just some further best practices in face-to-face. I think I've already covered this, but choose a variety of activity in your lessons. As a side note, I will say my lessons, the way I used to make them, would last 4 weeks. 2 classes a week, 3-hour classes. You might not want to do it that way. I did it that way for a reason. I took the time to create the lesson. I called it a unit. We worked on it throughout the month, and I tweaked it as we went. But I did it because I didn't have to do a lesson plan every day. I would do one big unit. We would go in. If I thought something needed to be added, I would add to it. If I thought something was too much, we'd change it. But you can make it as simple as 45 minutes. You know, it just depends on how complicated you want to get and on your students. Utilize technology tools that are compatible with your technology. Know what you have, know what your students have, especially in face-to-face, that's easier to know. But you might have a computer lab, you might have iPads, you might have nothing, but there's phones, which would make me sad. I hope more of us have more technology by now, but it happens. Do not introduce too many new technology applications on a HyperDoc. Don't throw a bunch of new stuff at them because you don't want to stress them out, and you don't want to stress yourself out either because you're going to be. And create a HyperDoc that could be used in, well, I still didn't fix that slide, but it could be, the way I liked to create HyperDocs was I tried to do it where I could envision my student doing it by themselves or with us as a class. So if the student walks in and they miss class on Monday and said, what did I do? I direct them to Google Classroom and they can catch up, or they can catch up from home. But I always tried to kind of make it where it was flexible enough that they could do either one. And that's kind of where I'm at right now. If anybody has, I just kind of wanted to take a few minutes anyway, so I'm right where I wanted to be. Because a lot of times what happens in these sessions is you want to know how to do things and you don't know how. And so if anybody has anything like that, any additional questions, either about how to create, share, use, or HyperDocs in face-to-face or remote, feel free to ask them now because that's what I'm here for. That's an interesting question, Meryl. She asked if I've ever used Google Forms in my HyperDoc. In them, yes. As a HyperDoc, no. So I use Google Forms. Google Forms I like to use because it's just so easy to do. And it's a quick way for them to answer, right? Without having to go to a Google document itself. But I've never turned a HyperDoc into one. And I'm not saying that you can't. I'm saying I've never done it. But I'd love to, I'm up for the challenge though. Or if you do it, let me know. Can you show others how to get the templates for the HyperDoc girls? Yes, absolutely. So they do have a lot of Google templates. I'm not aware of any templates that are not Google at this time. Doesn't mean they don't exist. I just don't know what they are or if they exist. I did kind of try to look around to see, but mostly it looks like on their website, it's still just Google stuff. So if you go to HyperDocs, you saw what I did basically. I just typed in HyperDocs. This is their website, and I'm going to put all of this in the chat at the end. But right here is where they've got sample HyperDocs. They've got templates, and you can also share on this. If you have one you would like others to be able to use, you have to sign in to do it, but you can also share with them. I was just seeing what this is because I didn't. Yeah, this is where you can search for lessons also on this website. But to answer your question, so the templates are right here. These are the ones from HyperDocs themselves. And they're all right here. You can also Google, HyperDoc templates, and you're probably going to come in. But these are the main ones that they have. You'll see like this is the basic HyperDoc if you're not aware of it. I think this is the one that when I'm doing a Google, this is usually my go-to because I feel like it covers everything, but there's different versions. And, of course you can change it. You can add stuff to it. You can add pre-reading, you can add, pre-assessment, whatever you want to do to make it your own. That's one. And then this is my website that I made that already has HyperDocs made, but specific to adult education was my point. I mean, I made it. The only reason I made this website in the beginning is because I wanted my own place to put them all because I had so many. But then, of course, I'm a big share. They usually say technology people, we like to share, and I do. So I wanted to share because I also was hoping people would share with me, and some people have. So, and because we have all of the subjects and we have, beyond that. And people still do share with me from time to time. And I put them on there because there's a lot of resources out there for K through 12, but there's not a lot out there for us. So, I try to help as much as possible. Unless they were Googling HyperDocs and education, then there's a link that goes to the Boo page. Okay, the Boo page. Sharing is caring. See, Meryl, I just got to know Meryl the other day. I knew she was one of me. But also let me go ahead and in the chat, I was going to share. I kind of did put a little resource sheet for you guys together. It's not so much about how to as that was the one in the first one is, but it's just a resource Wakelet just to kind of get started here. soon as I remember how to use Wakelet. Okay, there we go. That's a Wakelet of resources. I may add a couple things to it, but that's fine. Okay, so just to kind of close it up then, in the chat, if you could, please share at least, I have a typing error, darn it. It's 2 typing errors. One takeaway from today's session about taking HyperDocs to the next level. That might be maybe a new strategy, a new practice, a new tool, something else. Maybe one thing that you took away today, and I am going to save the chat so I can get these emails so I can send those to you. I think I'm also going to put that document on the Wakelet. Lilia says, trying it on the learning management system. Lilia, are you using a learning management system now?
Yes, we're using Blackboard.
Excellent. Okay, great. That's perfect for that. Anybody else? One person says they use Canvas. Tiffany, getting to be an expert on Nearpod and turning lessons into the HyperDoc thinking. Good, Tiffany. That's what I want you to do. Meryl says, I like the variety of ways to create a HyperDoc. I love Google, but it doesn't have to be Google. Yeah, exactly. I love Google too. Looking forward. Oh, excellent. Yeah, yeah. A lot of the things we mentioned today are on the PD portal. Yeah, we have 2 sessions on Wakelet. So yeah, that we did last year. That was my last HyperDoc, I think, was last year. So Wakelet, Edpuzzle, all of those are actually on the PD portal. We've done those in the past. But yeah, check Wakelet out. Wakelet's awesome. Carlotta, I'm going to start using HyperDocs and looking forward to see how it will make my life easier. Well, hopefully easier. If it doesn't, send me a message.
Thank you to Ashley for coming back for week number 2. I have to say that I've missed you, Ashley.
Aww.
There was a time when we did a lot of Tech and Tells together, spanning many years, actually, over the last couple of years. Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. I learn a lot from you as well. So I want to say thank you because I know your schedule is very, very busy. And so I appreciate you so much for doing this. And
we'll see Meryl next, right?
yes, and I just do want to give a shout out to Meryl Redfern, who is also on the webinar today from Dallas College. And if you have not checked out the recorded Tech and Tell webinars on Padlet in the PD portal, please do so. Meryl has done 2 sessions on Padlet already, and she's going to be coming back to share her expertise with using Padlet for math. So her session title is Mastering Math Concepts with Padlet. Now the date is going to be July 30th. Okay, so registration will be coming out soon for the Padlet Tech and Tell. So all right, everyone, I don't see any more messages. And on behalf of Train PD at T-Call and everyone, I want to say thank you again. And thank you to Ashley. Take care, everybody. I'm going to close the doors, I like to say, and we'll see you. We'll see you next time, July 30th for Padlet. Bye-bye, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.